Now, we are live inside the home of marijuana activist Mark Emery right now. A big day today, of course, with this legislation coming down.
Wonderful day.
Wonderful day. And this right now, 30 grams of marijuana is what people can carry. What does this equal?
Well, 30 grams will be what you're allowed to possess, and it would equal 50 of these 0.6 gram joints or 200 of these bong hits.
All right. Well, the thing is that with this 30 grams of pot, this is what you'll be allowed to carry once this is legalized. But right now, as it stands, it appears that there are a lot of people who are behind bars or facing charges for much less than this. And defense attorneys tell us today that even Crown attorneys are struggling with this issue.
I have clients charged with what we call trace amounts. That is, an amount of marijuana so small that you can't even weigh it.
So now that the federal government is looking to allow the public to carry up to 30 grams of pot, Aaron Harned is calling for all marijuana charges within the courts to be stayed or withdrawn. Harned is the lawyer behind the landmark case that led to the legalization of medical marijuana. He says even prosecutors are feeling conflicted.
Can you imagine being a prosecutor and having to seek a jail term against somebody for an offense that you know is going to be legal in a year's time? Prosecutors are humans too, and they really don't want to be placed in that kind of hypocritical position.
The legislation sets out a zero-tolerance policy for drivers getting behind the wheel. Toronto police say they've been experimenting with road test technology, but have to wait for the feds to approve the equipment. Meanwhile, police say they will continue to enforce the current law as it stands, but claim they have not made simple marijuana possession an enforcement priority in years. One U of T professor says the upcoming pot rules will have the biggest positive impact on the marginalized and racialized people in the city.
Trudeau admitted to smoking pot himself. I'm sure he's never been criminalized for doing so. But if you were to go to this city's more marginalized communities, you'd probably find plenty of people who do have criminal records for cannabis-related crimes.
Mark, we want to thank you for letting us in your home on this day. Thank you very much.
It's a wonderful day.
It's a wonderful day, as Mark says. But of course, coming up later in the show, pot's going to be legal here in Canada, but it is still very much illegal in the majority of the United States. And what happens when people have criminal records linked to marijuana who are trying to travel there? We'll talk about that coming up a little bit later in the show. Well, the Canadian government has released its plan to legalize marijuana, but what does that mean for Canadians who are trying to travel south of the border? Well, the majority of the U.S. still criminalizes marijuana, and they're very aware of what's happening on this side of the border. U.S. Customs tells CityNews in a statement, the sale, possession, production, and distribution of marijuana all remain illegal under U.S. federal law. Consequently, crossing with marijuana is prohibited and could potentially result in fines, apprehension, or both. A U of T Prof. Akwasi Awusu Bempa says that even if criminal records involving marijuana possession are expunged, it could still affect your ability to travel.
I do know that the Americans have access to our records and that these are shared on kind of a rolling basis, so they might actually have records already, or they would have records already for people who've previously been convicted, and even if their records were to be expunged, there's still a chance that those records would be held by the Americans. But this is, I think, one of the reasons it's key to expunge the records for individuals that have been convicted, because a criminal record, of course, limits ability to travel, it limits participation in the job market, and again, because societies more marginalized have been typically more criminalized than others, I think it's important, and it would be the just thing for us to do, to pardon those individuals for those crimes that are no longer illegal.
Well, U.S. Customs and Border Protection says that they will stop weed from going over the border, even if people are heading to adjoining states where marijuana is already legal, including Maine and Washington State.